Founded by Madam Ellen Curtis in 1845 as Demorest Manufacturing Company. And there's a bit of speculation around the 1845 date because Ellen Curtis did not marry William Jennings Demorest until 1858, and it was common to add a few years to the date to make companies sound like they had more experience than they did. Anyway, the Demorest Manufacturing Company was known for sewing machine manufacturing, but their first product was the Magic Summer Stove, which was a portable stove. Between the years of 1860 and 1887, Demorest would produce two different flavors of sewing machine. The Demorest Running Stitch, which sold for $5, which would be equivalent to you spending $190.12 in the year 2025, and the Barlow and Demorest Sewing Machine, which was their premium model, and it sold for $25, which would be equivalent to you spending $950.62 in the year 2025. They also had a separate business that sold paper patterns to make dresses. In 1883, Madame Demorest would retire and would sell the company to advertising agents from New York City, Garrett S. and Frank M. Schofield. This was the offices at 17 East and 14th Street, New York City. The pattern business was a separate entity, and it was sold off around 1887. They would build an all-new factory in 1889 in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. The buildings would cover 6 acres, and they would employ 250 people, so they could crank out about 50 sewing machines a day, or about 20,000 sewing machines annually. At this point, sewing machines wasn't their only product. Demorest would also produce opera chairs and New York-branded bicycles. Things were great until they wasn't. In 1907, Lycoming Engine Manufacturing would rise from the ashes of Demorest Sewing Machine Company to supply engines for this newfangled contraption called the automobile. Their first automobile engine would come in 1910, and it would go into a Veely. For those that don't know, Veely made cars from 1908 through 1928, but it's worth mentioning that the company themselves goes back even farther than that, starting in 1902, making carriages. In 1910, the Veely Model D would get the Lycoming's 40 horsepower inline 4, which was cast in pairs with a bore of 4.5 inches and a stroke of 5.5 inches, which brought overall cubic inch displacement to 350 cubic inch displacement, which was a pretty big 4-cylinder. Lycoming never wanted to get into the automobile business directly, but they wanted to be an engine company to automobile manufacturers. In the early days, most manufacturers built assembled cars where companies bought parts and pieces from various companies and assembled them in-house. By 1920, Lycoming was producing 60,000 engines a year with a workforce of 2,000 people to handle that kind of output. Lycoming needed a new foundry complex, which they built. The very first 6-cylinder Lycoming would be produced in 1924. They also built their very first inline 8 that year. Lycoming would supply engines to companies such as, but not limited to, Veely, Lone Star, Norwalk, Bell, Gardner, Elkhart, Piedmont, Skelton, Champion, Texan, Dort, Elcar, but they were best known for building the Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg engines. Businessman E.L. Cord, who made his money selling cars, would be approached by a group of Chicago investors who bought Auburn from the Eckhart family. But they wasn't able to make a profit with a company, knowing the reputation of E.L. Cord. I mean, this guy could sell ice to an Eskimo, water to a sailor, sawdust to a carpenter. You get where I'm going with this. Knowing the reputation of E.L. Cord, the investors approached E.L. Cord with the proposition to manage Auburn. E.L. Cord countered with an offer to take over the company completely. The group of Chicago investors were pretty much up shit creek without a paddle, so they agreed to E.L. Cord's proposition. E.L. Cord would paint the unsold stock in flamboyant, striking colors, also added bright trim and pinstriping to make his cars look special. E.L. Cord wanted performance to match his striking car's appearance. The Continental Inline 6 just wasn't doing it for him, so he caught wind that Lycoming had an inline 8 as well as an inline 6, and he would go with them to supply the power plants to power his Auburn cars, cutting ties with Continental Motors. In 1927, E.L. Cord would buy Lycoming to have complete control, as well as the money coming in from various other engine contracts, which they were still building engines for Gardner in St. Louis, Elkhart in Indiana, among other contracts in various other places. E.L. Cord purchased Lycoming for $2 million. By 1929, Lycoming had manufactured 500,000 engines. During E.L. Cord's ownership of Lycoming, made some of the best automotive engines on the market during the time. Straight 8s for both the Auburn and Cord L29, a V8 for the Cord 810, 812, which could be had naturally aspirated or supercharged. They built a different type of V12. It was America's cheapest V12, and it could be found in the 1932 through 1934 Auburns. But the piece de resistance was the Duesenberg Model J and SJ engine. The J was naturally aspirated 265 horsepower, while the SJ was supercharged, and it made 320 horsepower, which was a number that wouldn't be matched until 1955 with the Chrysler 300. In 1929, Lycoming would start getting into aero engines, and the automotive engines would split from the aero engine company. E.L. Cord would cancel all of the engine contracts, shooting himself in the foot, essentially, with all outside companies in 1931, making Lycoming engine manufacturer proprietary to Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg. But as we know, the Great Depression was very hard on luxury car brands. The end came swift after getting caught in stock manipulation, which was a side hobby that E.L. Cord partaked in, and he was caught and he was forced to sell all of his companies in the automotive sector. And that was the end of Lycoming Automobile Engine Company. But since the aero engine and the automobile engine split, the aero engines got to live on, and they're still around to this day. But that is another engine episode for another day. Before moving on to Name That Tune, what engine companies, manufacturers, or just engines in general would you like to see featured in mini documentary format on this channel? What it's like this year? Put it in the comment section below. We've already done ones on the Duesenberg as well as the Auburn 12. We still have to do the straight 8 and the V8, which might come this year. So just put down in the comment section which ones you'd like to see. All right, now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to get both the name of the band and the song title correctly in the comment section will have their comment pinned to the top of it. Switching it up a little bit, I really love that song. Thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, shoot me a comment in the comment section below. I read and answer all comments posted. I don't say that for self-worth. I just say that I treat this channel differently. It's a car community that I'm very much a part of. Thank you guys so much for making it awesome. Until next time, toodaloo!